Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of these CFP hypotheticals, a lot of different things that could go down this weekend and change the way the seedings work, change the way which teams are in. So a lot of different things that could happen, and we'll obviously break it down on Monday when all of this stuff unfolds. But let's get into early signing day. Let's talk about all the things that have happened over the last couple of days because it's been quite a few things. Definitely a very busy last couple of days around the recruiting world, and it's definitely a lot of different things that could happen in the next couple of days and really the next couple of hours. With that guy right there, Justice Terry, we'll talk about him here in a second. But let's start with that top 10 rankings because we talked about it on Wednesday when we got together. Texas was on track to get that number one spot. They have that number one spot right now. It's still very much up for grabs. A lot of different things that will happen over the next little bit that will put these other classes in better standing, including Justice Terry for possibly Georgia. So a lot of different things in variation here. We'll see what happens in the grand scheme of things, but Texas is in that pole position right now. They are the number one team in the country. Alabama right there, Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State round out the top five. Then you get a little bit crazy. You do have Auburn, you do have Michigan, and you obviously LSU, A&M, Tennessee, not quite as crazy. Tennessee able to lock down David Sanders, which was absolutely huge. One of the can't-miss prospects of this entire class, and they were able to lock him down. Then you do have you have Florida, Notre Dame, USC, Miami, and Ole Miss sitting right on the outside looking into the top 10. A lot of really, really good classes here, and a couple of classes that are ranked a little bit lower than what their normal average would give you. I believe Oregon has the highest average of the entire country. They only have a certain number of commits. I believe only 21 if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of different things happening around there that maybe the ranking isn't quite as representative. I love to see the average recruit ranking. I feel like that's probably the best way to go about it. So definitely if you would like to look at that, you're more than welcome to. I believe Oregon's 1, Alabama 2, Texas 3 if I'm not mistaken on that one. So a lot of different things to kind of go into this and a lot of different ways to measure different programs and how they did on throughout this week. But Texas definitely dominated the day in a lot of different ways. But for me, I think when you look at the winners, Oregon sets the pace. They had an incredible weekend. They got Naheem Offord, the number 2 cornerback in the country. They got Saigo Tele, the top 10 quarterback in the country. Two really talented guys. They got to flip to them. It sounds like Naheem Offord might have a shoe on the way, so be on the lookout for that. Definitely a little bit of feather in the cap for Oregon when they're recruiting, but two very, very talented guys. It didn't stop there. They were able to keep Dallas Wilson in the fray where it felt like Florida was making a real push for him. They were able to keep him a part of the class, and now they have the top wide receiver in the country in DeCorian Moore. They also have the number 4 in Dallas Wilson. So it's elite. It's exactly what you would expect Oregon to do after the year that they've had and the last couple of years that they've had, but really remarkable stuff. This program continues to improve every single year. They got a couple of big-time offensive tackles and offensive linemen as well, so it's a ridiculous class. There's no doubt about that. Every single player is elite. Every single player I expect to be a huge effect, and I think Naheem Offord in this cornerback class is just absolutely ridiculous. They're going to be really, really good on that back end for quite some time, and definitely Dan Lanning is setting them up in an incredible place. And then you do have Texas, the number 1 team in the country. They obviously had a very, very nice weekend. They got a couple of huge commitments from Michael Terry, the 5-star number 1 athlete in the country, likely going to be a little bit of a running back wide receiver hybrid when he's at Texas. Very talented kid, definitely one of those guys that Sark was very excited to get in his class. And then Cade Phillips, the 4-star or 5-star, depending on where you're looking, safety or corner, depending on where you're looking. A very talented kid. He flipped from LSU to Texas. This was a huge one, no doubt about that. That back-end class was very talented. The safeties were playing really well. Adding a guy that can play safety or corner is huge, and Cade Phillips is definitely that guy. Very, very talented kid, and definitely one of those that can totally change what your back-end looks like. So that's a huge pickup. They also got Jamie French to pick Texas over Florida at the end of the day. No craziness there. Josiah Sharma ended up getting into the class, so no major changes late, which is huge. You know, when you don't have that huge flip that you weren't expecting or anything crazy like that, you're in pretty good shape. Did miss out on Michael Fasusi, and Oklahoma was able to pick him up. Huge for them. Not the greatest week for Oklahoma. We'll talk about them here in a second, but overall, that's a huge commitment and definitely one that Texas badly wanted, but you're in a great place. There's no doubt about that. A little bit weak in the trenches this time around, but at the end of the day, probably the deepest position that Texas has on their roster right now. So not necessarily the top of the list in terms of what they needed to do in this cycle. I totally understand where they landed here. Obviously, a lot of wide receivers, a lot of talented back-end players, Probably want a little bit more from the offensive line in the portal, but we'll see. We'll see how good they feel. I mean, Trevor Gooseby came in last week and did absolutely incredible work on that offensive line. So maybe they feel great about the guys they have behind the scenes and didn't feel the need to go out and get someone special in this class at least. Then you do have Florida at 11. They had a very, very nice weekend, and it was a little bit up and down. They missed out on Jamie French. They missed out on Dallas Wilson when it felt like they might be able to pick them up, but did flip Hilton Stubbs before signing day from Miami. Lagonza Hayward from Tennessee was a huge one. Joseph Mbachu from Texas. A lot of really talented guys in this class, and obviously they need to make some portal moves. There's no doubt about that, but this is the class you need. No doubt. I mean, when you have Billy Napier coming back for another year, being able to show all of the boosters, show all of the people around there that you're capable of getting a near top 10 class, it's huge. It's definitely putting things in the right direction there. You put DJ Lagway with a couple of these big-time playmakers on the outside. It's going to be special stuff. Still a ton of work to do in the portal, no doubt about that, but they're in a really good position, and this week was very kind to the Florida Gators. And then you do have South Carolina. They'll be able to build up a little momentum they've had during the season, was able to flip Damola Ajitahun, very talented offensive lineman for Georgia Tech, got Christian Ingram in kind of a battle with Tennessee and a couple others, a huge pickup for them, and this program continues to rise. The 20th class isn't going to hit you over the head or anything like that. They still have to do some work in the portal, but at the end of the day, what Shane Beamer is doing over there has been absolutely incredible. They continue to build something really special, and it feels like a group that is going to be an awesome group for them. I think the offensive linemen, especially in that class, are really, really talented. It's going to be awesome to watch what South Carolina can do with this one, because this feels like the one that could take them to that next level. It feels like the one that could be around when they flip that switch from a 9-win team to a possible playoff team. It'll be awesome to see what this class can do. And then Florida State was able to flip the switch just a little bit on National Signing Day and pick up a couple of big-time commitments. They got Usman Kroma, a very talented running back that was flipped from Georgia. Javon Boggs flipped from UCF, kind of probably staying with Gus Malzahn if I had to imagine. So a lot of different things to like about this class. 25 still not good enough. I think they understand that. Mike Norvell gets that. They're going to have an elite portal class and then see what happens in 2025 and get right back on track. But overall, I think this is a good class to start off. Probably going to need a little bit more next year, and then so on and so on. It'll be interesting to see what Florida State can do on the trail the next little bit, because haven't necessarily been quite as committed to the trail as some other teams have. They've done an incredible job this year. We'll see what they can do in 2025 and in the portal the rest of this year. And then you do have the losers. I'll start with Oklahoma here, and frankly, Oklahoma was fine. It wasn't necessarily like the bottom falled out or anything aggressive. They did get Michael Fasusi, was able to hold on to him, one of the biggest wins of the week, no doubt about that. They did lose 3 big-time receivers, though. Grayson Harris, Cortez Mills, as well as Marcus Harris, really, really talented players. All guys that can make a big-time effect on what you're going to do offensively, and the offense is going to need a lot of work in the portal. They've already lost a couple of guys. We'll talk about them next segment, and they're going to have to do a lot of filling. There's no doubt about that. I think they had a fine week for the most part. Getting Michael Fasusi in the class is absolutely huge. The skill positions are not necessarily elite in this class by any means. I think they have some guys that can make some plays. They're going to need to do a lot of work in the portal. There's no doubt about that. They knew that going into the offseason, so nothing's really changed about what their approach is, but definitely a lot more need around that wide receiver position than there was even a couple of days ago. So a lot of things to figure out around there. Definitely not the week that they were outright hoping for. They got Michael Fasusi. That's more than fine of a consolation prize, but lost a lot of really talented players on the outside. For LSU, they were able to get another offensive lineman in Solomon Thomas from Florida State, so that's a huge win. We're able to keep DJ Pickett in the fold, which is a massive win. They did lose out on the best player in Louisiana, which is Jakeem Stewart. He is going to USC. He is committed there, as well as losing Cade Phillips. This was a tough week for LSU. It was a fine week. They were able to hold on to that top 10 class. They were able to do the things that they needed to do. It definitely showed some of the holes in LSU's recruiting. It definitely showed that maybe they're not swinging the biggest stick in terms of NIL. Maybe they're not even swinging close to the biggest stick in terms of NIL. So a lot of things need to happen around there. The portal is going to be huge for LSU this year, and we'll talk about that here in a second. They already have their eyes on a couple of different players from the portal, but overall, probably not the week that LSU wanted to have. If they were able to keep Cade Phillips in the class, if they were able to get Jakeem Stewart to commit to them, it would have been a huge week. It would have been a possibly program changing and gotten everything right back on track type of week. They didn't do that. They're in a really interesting position, and this portal class is as important as really anyone since they were able to pick up Joe Burrow a little bit ago in LSU. So a lot of different things that need to happen around there, and this recruiting class is more than fine to kind of bridge the gap. They're going to need to do a lot more work in the portal, no doubt about that. And then you do have Clemson at 26. They're fourth in the ACC. They're way, way too low on this list right about now, and they're going to have to do work in a place that they have not done work in at all under Dabo Swinney, which is the portal. They're going to have to find guys in the portal. They only have 15 commits in this class. They do have some great players, including Amari Adams, including Braden Jacobs, really talented players in this group. They're not doing enough. There's no doubt about that. When you have Miami scaling the way that they are, when you have Florida State finding their footing, when you have a team like Georgia Tech that's ranked above you right now in recruiting, you have a lot of things to figure out. You have a lot of different things that you're going to have to find out over the next little bit about your team, about your program, and you're going to have to go into the portal one way or the other. If you don't go into the portal, this weekend is going to be the last time for a while that we see Clemson in the ACC championship, because they're getting a little bit less talented every single year. They're getting a little bit closer to the pack every single year. They have to figure this out. 26th is just not remotely good enough if you're going to be the class of the ACC going forward. That being said, with the Big 12 in the ACC, wasn't necessarily the best week for them. It hasn't been the best week for them in quite some time on National Signing Day, if we're being totally honest, and this is a huge reason why people go towards SEC bias or go towards the Big 10 when they're talking about the playoff. It's because of this. The SEC brought in 18 5-stars in their classes this cycle. Big 10 brought in 9 5-star players, really talented guys. ACC snagged 2. Big 12 came up with 1. Notre Dame came up with 1. So the entirety of the Big 12 came up with the same exact number of 5-stars as Notre Dame did. That's not good enough. I think we all understand that. That is why people lean towards the SEC. That is why, in some ways, that I lean towards the SEC. Because they're a little bit bigger, they're a little bit faster, they're a little bit stronger, and that bears itself out in pretty much every facet of this game. Whether it's which teams win national titles, which teams get the most guys drafted, which teams have the most first-rounders, all of that goes towards the SEC and the Big Ten. It continues to play out on National Signing Day. It's one of those things that has become kind of a tradition around the recruiting world. It is going to be the SEC and the Big Ten setting the pace, and then everyone else just has to figure out what they're doing right behind them. But overall, obviously, we have shown this year that it's not necessarily the end-all, be-all by any means. There's a lot of talented teams out there, a lot of talented players, but it just gives you an idea of the gap that is forming between the SEC and Big Ten and everyone else. And it definitely bears itself out pretty much every single National Signing Day. But we're not all the way home yet. A lot of different things that will happen over the next month or so as we get to the full signing day on, I believe, February 8th or so. I can't remember the exact day, but right around that time frame, you'll figure out what exactly your class is. The biggest one to come off the board will come off the board later today. Justice Terry will be committing at noon today. Feels like it's going to be Georgia. It feels like everything is pointing towards the Bulldogs right now. I still think Texas will have something to say. Auburn possibly as well, but the way that I see it, it's probably going to be Georgia, and then we'll see if any chaos happens. Maybe there's a little bit of chaos. Maybe Texas can bolster that number 1 class that they've been able to build up, but a remarkable couple of days, and probably going to continue to get a little bit crazy. You have to assume that there's a couple of twists and turns that we're not expecting, and we'll update you on those as they come. But let's take our second break here. When we come back, we got to talk about the transfer portal updates. A lot of different things happening, including this wide receiver class in the transfer portal is absolutely elite. We'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.